So I just want to welcome everybody to our incredibly wonderful opportunity here to speak with one of the most renowned, researched, and educated people that I know on the topic of probiotics, Natasha Trenev. And I had the honor of meeting her probably only a few months ago, and only talking to her a few times, I learned so much. So our topic today is probiotics, the most important health concept in the 21st century, and really what we need to know, not only as people, but as practitioners. And I have to admit, I didn't know there was so much misinformation out there, Natasha. So I was shocked when even just the little things that you told me. So I appreciate you so much being here. Would you mind just taking the stage and giving us a little bit of background on yourself, please?
Sure. As you heard, my name is Natasha Trenev. I've been in the field of fermented foods and probiotics for 56 years. I go back to the mid-1960s. I introduced natural Bulgarian-style yogurt through my family's business in the mid-1960s, set the standard for the state of California for natural Bulgarian-style yogurt in 1969, introduced kefir through Altadena Dairy, helped to set the standard in New York for kefir in the late 1970s, and was working with numerous universities, including the University of South Carolina and Nebraska, in their studies of probiotic organisms, which at that time included only Lactobacillus acidophilus. And for almost 30 to 40 years, acidophilus was the only organism that was accepted by the natural health food industry and natural practitioners as the prominent beneficial bacteria for human health. And so that's how I started the whole field of probiotics, because I realized that it's going to take time to educate everybody to understand what bacteria are necessary and what bacteria line certain areas of our GI tract and which ones have evolved with Homo sapiens. And number three is how many years of literature has this bacteria been covered in. So Lactobacillus acidophilus probably has been covered for well over 100 years. And it is a staple. And the reason a lot of people get out of using Lactobacillus acidophilus, because number one, it's difficult to grow. Number two, they want to treat symptoms. And the whole purpose of fixing the GI tract is not to treat symptoms, but to create an environment where the body is given the proper mix of bacteria to allow it to heal itself. And that is the message that I brought to the world when I introduced my first probiotic product called Superdophilus, and actually went through healthcare practitioners, did not go through the health food store, came in a freeze-dried powder, and still that original probiotic is not matched by anything on the market today. Why? Because it takes an awful lot of knowledge, dedication, and ethics to make the right product, not just be interested in making money, because I felt responsible for making sure that people got healthy. So now that I've explained about acidophilus, basically acidophilus likes to live in the small intestine because it's something we call the facultative anaerobe, means that it can live in the presence of oxygen or without oxygen. So historically, the small intestine, which is about 20 feet long, is where it likes to live. And the large intestine, where the colon is found, is for what we call obligate anaerobes, meaning bacteria that do not like to live in the presence of oxygen. So with my very pioneering work in the middle, I would say 1980s, I worked with the most prominent researcher in the field of bifidobacteria, Dr. Jeremiah Rasic of Yugoslavia, his partner, Dr. Kerman. They published the book on bifidobacteria that is now probably the most historically referenced book of its kind, where they introduced the importance of bifidobacteria to large intestinal health and why human beings need this bacteria. And so that was like the second bacteria that I introduced to the probiotic field as a necessary bacterium. And then because of my background in yogurt, I knew about the research in yogurt and specifically Lactobacillus bulgaricus, which was named after the famous long-lived Bulgarian people. And it was isolated by a very prominent researcher, Dr. Ilya Mechnikov, who was a partner to Louis Pasteur. And he wrote the first book called The Prolongation of Life, which talked about this bacteria's essential role in detoxifying the intestinal tract, making sure that the food is pre-digested to lessen those toxic materials that are present in the 27 feet of GI tract. And it was hailed the bacteria prominent with longevity. So each bacteria that I included in my products is based on historical fact and the facts that most are significant in making sure that the bacteria is safe and that it is something that the Homo sapiens have been including some way in their diet for centuries. And then the fourth bacteria that I introduced was called Bifidobacteria infantis, or is still called Bifidobacteria infantis. And the reason this bacteria is important is because it's the most essential bacteria for a newborn to have, because it regulates the overreaction of the immune system to build a tolerance early on in age. So because we're not doing a whole course, I just have to condense this information. So please bear with me. So basically, why this bacteria is so important, and this is old information, only 7% of mothers in North America are able to transfer this essential Bifidobacteria infantis to their newborn infants. And this is tragic, even if the infant is vaginally born and breastfed. So that is part of the reason we have so many learning disabilities, because without this tolerance being established on the intestinal wall at an early age, or when the child is still an infant, the immune system will overreact every bit of nourishment that comes across that intestinal wall, because the tolerance has not been built when the infant is a newborn. So this product that we call Life Start is recommended for pregnant women, nursing mothers, newborn infant, or anybody at any age who has a sensitivity and probably didn't get this essential bacteria when they were born.
All right,
So
I'm going to pause you.
historically, that's
I'm gonna
it.
pause you. Hang on a second.
Yeah.
So, and I just want to have everyone, because everyone's now in. Thank you for being here. So Natasha, I just want to clarify, because I usually come in as the interpreter, right? I slow you down and be like, okay, let's repeat what
Sure.
you said. So you've introduced 4 bacteria that you're talking about. I'm going to go one step higher. I think what I just heard is amazing. 7% of mothers are able to pass this bacteria, this infitus bacteria, to their babies. And the reason that I'm hearing when they can't do that is we're seeing massive food sensitivities and learning disabilities in infants and toddlers because they lack this one probiotic strain, just
That's
one.
correct.
So I think it's amazing. So I'm going to post a question to you. Go a little bit higher and kind of explain to the group the term microbiota and the microbiome.
Microbiome.
Yeah. So how did we mess these terms up?
Well, it's, historically terms get adopted that fit whatever learning or marketing objective people have. So basically, you have 100 trillion microbes lining your 27 feet of GI tract. And those 100 trillion microbes are called the microbiota. The microbiome is the sum total of all their genetic material of those 100 trillion microbes that line that GI tract. And their genetic material is 238,000 versus our 22,000. So we're just beginning to learn about their genetic material. We're just barely scraping the surface of understanding these 100 trillion microbes that line the GI tract.
Can you repeat the books you said before? You mentioned 2 books, one by Louis Pasteur's partner. What book was
Yes,
that?
his name is Dr. Ilya Mechnikov. It's called The Prolongation of Life.
prolongation
Let me
of,
see. I think I have the other book back here somewhere hiding.
of course you do.
So,
All right. So once we
yeah,
get that book,
this is the book. You can't find this anymore. It's like gold. It's called Bifidobacteria and Their Role, Jeremiah Rosich and Joseph A. Kerman. And it gives you everything you need to know about bifidobacteria. And luckily, I've got 2 or 3 books and I watch them like gold.
she's already promised one to me, so don't anyone ask. No, just kidding. All right, so that's great. So we have the microbiota, the microbiome, we've differentiated that. You said lactobacillus to me one time, and you said you don't understand why we're all worried about dairy and dairy-free. Can you just expand on that? Because when you said that to me, it kind of blew my mind, because I can't tell you, every product company I've worked for always has dairy-free probiotics. Can you just kind of destroy that myth?
Yeah, because let's break it down. Lactobacillus meaning milk bacteria. So it's in the name. They love milk because they are the smartest entities on this planet. They don't do anything to waste cellular energy. So their favorite food is milk. It's not meant for the human being. It's what they like. And what they break down for themselves, we benefit as a byproduct. So milk is the most important medium for them to grow on, not because we've been told that milk is so bad for us. And so we should grow our bacteria on something that they don't particularly find enticing. So and then acidophilus means friendly acid. So lactobacillus, milk bacteria, and then acidophilus, friendly acid. So each one of these terms has a meaning that people need to understand. And unfortunately, in our industry, it's the shortest route to the least resistance that most product developers want to take. And that's not good for our industry, and it's not good for the patients. It's not good for the clients.
Right. And then I saw on one of your interviews, you talked about spore forming probiotics. I'm going to ask you some high level questions, and then I'm going to go to some concepts like all disease begins in the gut and have you break that down for me. But I want to know about spore forming probiotics and your position on them. And then specifically, there's a big push for acromesia.
Mm-hmm.
That's one that they're studying for diabetes. So can you touch on spore forming probiotics, their right positioning and role? Because those are used as yeast eaters, Saccharomyces boulardii. We hear this all the time as practitioners. And guys, if you're drinking from a fire hose right now, just hang on because we're going to get to more general concepts.
Yeah, very easily explained. Soil bacteria are what we call spore formers. The reason they form spores is to protect themselves from the outside environment. And they are there to help organic soil production because they were meant for exterior life. In other words, they were meant to live in very harsh environment. So they developed specific skill sets to help their survival. So when they form a spore, that spore can generally last through heat as high as 400 degrees Fahrenheit, some even higher. And the spore is there for the bacteria to utilize as a cover until it decides it wants to sporulate or break the spore and become a regular microbe. And the reason your parents hopefully told you to wash your fruits and vegetables, not just from the pesticides, but even the organic ones, because you don't want a large number of these soil organisms entering your body, because the minute they're allowed to compromise an area of that 27 feet of GI tract, they can start producing toxins to dominate the territory. And our whole objective is to make sure that we never ingest large quantities of microbes that may have a therapeutic effect on one side, but then when allowed to overgrow, can and will produce toxins to dominate the territory. And that's what my biggest concern is, that we don't know enough about these organisms because they were ingested by certain cultures, but they were ingested in small and very precise amounts. And in the westernized cultures, we're not familiar with these bacteria, so ingesting them to take care of a problem is not a good idea, because it's even more dangerous than taking a pharmaceutical drug, because all bacteria are one-celled brains, and their primary objective is to promote its own kind. And it will do it at the expense of the host or anyone else, because that's their primal directive. So we have to be very careful when we ingest these one-celled brains and what their ultimate motive is, because we still are just scratching the surface to understand that complex microbiota composition.
Wow, that's really it's kind of interesting and terrifying all at the same time. So, what would you recommend for somebody that does have systemic candidiasis or overgrowth of yeast? Because the go-to probiotic in our industry, as we learn it, is Saccharomyces boulardii. What do you think?
Well, Saccharomyces boulardii is, first of all, not a spore former, it's a yeast. Saccharomyces boulardii is a taxonomic shift in names to really hide the origin of the yeast, which is a Saccharomyces cerevisiae. It's the bacteria used to brew beer and to ferment other things. So I cannot understand how our industry, who for maybe a half a century has told people to stay away from yeast products and had problems with candidiasis, can now all of a sudden be recommending the consumption of yeast. And let me tell you that when people tell you this is a beneficial yeast, it's a beneficial yeast if you don't have a problem with yeast overgrowth. But if you have a problem with yeast overgrowth, you should not be taking it, because it does first and foremost stimulate the growth of other yeasts. And that should be a big no-no. So remember, Saccharomyces boulardii is a yeast. It's not a soil bacteria. It's a yeast that's used under a different name to brew beer and other compounds that have been used around the decades or centuries. Does that make sense?
Yes, you're destroying everything that I once knew, but yes.
I'm sorry.
No,
I,
this is why I did it. I want people to know the truth. And when I met you, I just was like, we have to do this. So I kind of impromptu threw this on Natasha to be like, there was 100 and some people registered. Get ready.
Mhm.
So I think the industry is looking, and honestly, we're going to go to all disease begins in the gut, and so does all health. And I just want you to kind of lay out this concept, because we're not getting healthier. We're the fattest, sickest country in the world. Our digestion is terrible. Where our top 4 pharmaceutical prescribed drugs are GI. Over 250,000 people every year die of GI related incidences. Our kids have developmental issues, dyslexia, ADD, ADHD, SIBO's on the rise. I could go on and on and on and on. So my question to you is, give me, how would you explain to somebody all disease and all health begins in the gut?
Well, it was said 2,500 years ago by Hippocrates that all disease begins in the gut. And he's quoted many times, but people really don't understand it. So without going into a half a day lecture, which this would really take to explain, just remember your tube, your digestive tract starts at the mouth and ends at the other side, okay? And everything that comes into your mouth has to be digested and sterilized partially, can never be fully sterilized, because what's happening with digestion is that digestion is trying to discern what is a nutrition for the body and what is harmful for the body. So for the best example I can give you, stomach acid was designed to break down proteins and to kill bacteria, which are basically 90 or more % protein in composition. So you see how brilliant the stomach acid is. And it always horrifies me when people give antacids or proton pump inhibitors to inhibit, the production of acid in the stomach, because it's dangerous, because now the unwanted bacteria that come in with your food are now introduced into your small and large intestine and allowed to take a hold and cause different problems that we then tag with a name like, SIBO, or, we have colitis, or we have Crohn's disease, we have irritable bowel syndrome. Basically, this occurs whenever there's a displacement of bacteria in the wrong section of the GI tract, and you have an immune overreaction, or you have other bacteria that are subdued, and the ones that are harmful are allowed to overgrow. That's basically what happens. And so your digestion was designed to nourish you. And the beneficial bacteria that also line the GI tract, their position is, if you get the right ones, and I will talk about extensively about this, they're there to protect you. Why? Because you are the best environment for them to thrive. What is their primal directive for survival? Is to find the perfect environment for them to thrive. Your GI tract is a perfect environment for them to thrive. So they have a vested interest in protecting you. So they have communication with about 80% of your immune cells that line that GI tract, and they communicate by photon light emission. If you've ever thought about Star Wars being interesting, this is far more interesting. So they communicate with each other. And what's happening on that intestinal wall? You have gates that are called tight junctures. And those gates only open when the size of the molecular nutrient is perceived by the immune system to be okay and not to harm the body. And when it passes this intestinal wall into our blood, it passes without what we call food sensitivities, an allergic reaction, or eventually, if this process is broken down, it manifests in an autoimmune disease. Okay, stop me if I said something that someone doesn't understand.
No, we're good.
Okay, so then you have the so-called manufacturers, and you're talking about Akkermansia, mucinophilia, and it's promoted as a probiotic bacteria that can help with glucose levels in the blood. Okay, the thing is, we don't know enough about this bacterium, and the point is that I work with a world-renowned doctor who does, transplants of bifidobacteria in human GI tract. And her concern is that she finds Akkermansia in larger numbers in Parkinson's patients. And I tell her, it's only a problem if you're supplementing this bacteria, but if it's growing there naturally, it's okay, because we do not know it's a causal organism for that problem. And second of all, Acidophilus and Bulgaricus will stimulate the proper function of this Akkermansia. It will stimulate it to grow, but because it's intelligent, it will not allow it to overgrow and damage the body, which is its favorite habitat. Does that make sense? So when you're telling people to just throw in a bunch of organisms, just imagine you're throwing in organisms which we have no idea what other bacteria they may stimulate to grow. And if they're allowed to overgrow, what other things are they going to do to the intestinal lining that may not benefit us?
Right. So doing isolated bacteria like that, in copious amounts, you're saying could throw other bacteria out of balance and
Yeah.
cause, okay. So your concern is because the Akkermansia is a big push. I mean, there's companies out there with a lot of research that, they're saying doing this for a period of time does help control glucose, but maybe the underlying issue was a gut microbial imbalance in the first place, which caused the glucose to be imbalanced. And when they put specific bacteria in, it did balance. But it's kind of like the pH thing, right? When people are like, oh, you have to be alkaline. Somebody was acidic, drank a bunch of lemon water, got alkaline and felt better. But that doesn't mean we should push for beyond the optimal alkalinity of our body. It just means that that person felt better at a certain level of alkalinity. And so kind of the same thing here, too much of a good thing. So
in other words, you should not be supplementing bacteria that you don't know what would happen if it overgrows or it's not in a symbiotic relationship with other groups of bacteria in the gut. And we'll get to this business of throwing in 6, 8, 10 strains of so-called probiotic organisms without any knowledge what their effect will be on each other or what effect it's going to have on the whole composition of the microbiota.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's just get to it. Why wait? Let's talk about that. So there are many companies out there, and this is not a crack on any company or what they do. I'm just trying to figure out for myself as a practitioner the direction I want to go in after this webinar and gleaning the information. So there's many companies out there that'll have 100 billion CFU, which is colony forming units for people that don't know the terminology. That just means how many live active bacteria are in that capsule, in theory. And then there's multiple strain bacterias that are in one formulation. There's isolates that have one strain. So you have different probiotics that you recommend. And I also want you to go back to you do have a dairy-free one, which I thought was interesting because you did it out of market demand, essentially, for people that, because we do fear dairy in this country. I always say processed dairy, but many people just dairy in general. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on first question, multiple strands, high CFU counts, and then talk about your dairy-free formula, because I thought it was interesting how you fed it and how you grew it.
Good. Well, just to give you background, I was one of the founding members of the National Nutritional Foods Association. In 1970, when I first joined my family business called Continental Culture Specialists, we were raising money to reinstate the viability of that organization. And in 1989, the whole membership came to me and asked me to establish the first labeling standard of any kind in the industry, because thank God I had the reputation. And so they said, well, we know if you set a probiotic labeling standard, that'll help us set other standards in the whole dietary supplement division because people trust you, know you, and respect you. So in 1989, I developed a whole labeling standard for probiotics that, by the way, was voted on by thousands of members of the National Nutritional Foods Association, probably 5,000 plus, of manufacturers, distributors, retailers, educators, and brokers. And that passed, and I still have that documentation. Then in 1994, they came to me and said, oh, we got to work with Congress. We want to pass the Deshay Amendment. So we need you to revitalize your probiotic labeling standard, and we'll put it in a GMP book, and we'll, have it read into congressional record. It's a way of us promising Congress that we're going to self-regulate. Okay. So that's the second time I came to the industry and passed the standard. The problem is it's difficult to make money by following the labeling standard. So what happened is that once I introduced the products and the labeling standards, and we were going to implement something called True Label, not just for probiotics, but for every dietary supplement company that was a member of the National Nutritional Foods Association. In 3 to 4 years, they vacated their membership, is a nice way to put it, because they did not want to subject themselves to a True Label program, which was extremely fair. We would test product off the shelf across 5 regions in the health food industry, and we would not publish any of that. If we found a problem, we would contact the manufacturer. We would sit down on the standards committee, of which I was a member for 10 years, and we would talk to the manufacturer, see if the lab results were off or not, and so to make sure that they were following practice. And unfortunately, while I sat on that committee, time and again, 80% of all the dietary supplements on that shelf did not meet their label declaration. And so what happened with the probiotics is that there are manufacturers who make cell concentrates, and they need to make thousands of labels of these cell concentrates in order for them to keep a certain price for the products that they produce. So the only way they could do this is by taking a cell concentrate and not having any growth medium, any food, put these bacteria together, whether or not they were compatible or not. Because remember, the prime directive of each bacteria is mutual antagonism. And that mutual antagonism, the bacteria are not dormant. They're in something we call the arrested growth. And the less refrigeration it has, the more aggressive that arrested growth is. In other words, they're less confined by that. So they're put in a closed-ended system, which is a capsule. There's no food coming in and no waste going out. And now they're touching each other with a inert filler, such as cellulose or dextrose, and they have no food. So of course, they're going to start competing with each other. Because once you mix these bacteria, you cannot, there is no method known to science thus far that you can extrapolate how much CFUs you have of each bacteria that's in that capsule. So if you want to follow the science, number one, you need to have a potency guarantee for each bacteria that's in that formulation. And there's never been, they can give you totals of a group of bacteria, but they don't follow the standard and give you a potency guarantee of each bacteria that's in that mix. Then they should ethically report to you that bacteria that's allowed to touch each other, are they knocking each other out while they're in the capsule? And then number three, if they have, enterocoated capsules are not sufficient to protect the bacteria through the stomach acid. And again, that's another, lecture for much broader discussion. But the only thing that I have found in my years that protects bacteria from stomach acid is oil, because oil is not digested in the stomach. It's emulsified by bile. So all these bacteria that have 6, 8, 10 strains listed, you have no idea what you're getting when you put that bacteria, that product in your mouth. You have no idea what's alive. And that 50 billion, 100 billion becomes meaningless because they're all destroyed by the stomach acid. So you have no idea what makes it alive into your GI tract. And that's where the deception starts. So when I put my bacteria in oil, which cost me 10 years of research and a lot of headache to figure out, we had it tested independently in the Max Rubner Institute in Germany. And we found that the 3 bacteria I put in the Trenev trio survived stomach acid of 1.8 pH for well over an hour. That's unheard of. And then the bacteria are also bile tolerant. So what I've done is ethically figure out how the bacteria needs to be manufactured, stored, shipped, and ingested so that when it hits your GI tract, it's not stressed, you know exactly what you're getting, and it's alive and functional. That's the whole process. Because if those criteria are not met, that's why we're not seeing the significant results we should be seeing with the proper and precision supplementation of probiotic bacteria. Now, let me know if I need to expand on that.
No, I think it's fascinating. So you encapsulate your bacteria with oil, and you said when they're in the capsule that they can compete with each other because one, they're starving, and two, there's waste products, right? So they're kind of, they could be antagonistic. So are your bacteria kept refrigerated and in this arrested state of growth so that they don't compete or need food? Or tell me about that process with your probiotics.
Okay, so we have 2 delivery systems. One is the oil, which completely covers the bacteria and keeps them alive. They have their own food that I put in with the bacteria. It's called the intrinsic supernatant. And then we took the bacteria and put them in separate products along with their intrinsic supernatant, which is the original culture that you grow the bacteria in. That becomes their food, their protection, and everything that they need. Does that make sense? In other words, when they ferment the bacteria, it's too expensive to freeze dry everything together because it's about $100 a pound to freeze dry. So the reason they throw out all the fermentation end products and the original culture medium, because when you just concentrate the cells, you're only freeze drying 3 to 5%. So your cost of production goes down, but the protection of the bacteria is gone and their ability to function properly is hindered tremendously. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yep. Okay. So that makes sense to me. Anybody have questions on that?
So then,
yeah,
then you're asking, I'm sorry, maybe someone had a question. I apologize.
none yet. Go ahead.
So you asked me about developing a non-dairy medium. So honestly, it took me a couple of years and 40 or more formulations to find something that this bacteria liked as much as milk. And what I found was chickpea. Chickpea has a similar combination of protein to carbs. And it was big headache because I buy the organic chickpeas. It has to be ground, specifically. It has to be fermented specifically. It took me a long time to develop this. I didn't just scratch my head and say, oh, this is a good thing. Let me just throw this in. No, I'm very particular to make sure that the bacteria will actually ferment this, produce those beneficial byproducts, which we call fermentation end products. And now the industry is playing another game by calling them postbiotics, but there's no definition really of what postbiotics are. So you may be paying a lot for nothing, but you've gotten this in our product for the last 40 years. So this is one irritating point to me because it takes a lot of ethics and commitment to do this right because there's so much information that people don't have. So this particular supernatant, and when we put it separately in the product like superdophilus or bifidonate or bulgaricum, is used by people who have successfully treated patients who have Crohn's, colitis, inflammatory bowel disease because they're so sensitive. We have to give this in minute amounts so that, first of all, there's a tolerance developed and that the bacteria can start taking up attachment sites on the intestinal wall without aggravating the immune cells. So that's why we have those powders and the powdered products. They're good for anybody. And they have a different delivery system than my oil. And it's all designed to handle that 27 feet of GI tract, and especially the GI tract of somebody compromised that has multiple allergies, food sensitivities, autoimmune problems, Crohn's, colitis. We just give different names. It just means that the immune system is now intolerant to everything coming across that intestinal wall.
Yep. So are you okay with giving us kind of like a recommendation of here's how I would start taking your products for anyone?
Sure.
You can
We
give
have
specifics if you want with conditions.
we have protocols for everything that we've developed with doctors in their clinics and have been used successfully for years. We have also developed protocols with the prominent Dr. Hassan, who, as you know, published papers and was ridiculed on the fact that she said that the vaccines caused the elimination of bifidobacteria in the large intestine. So if you had long haul COVID or you've been vaccine injured, you have lost all of your bifidobacteria in your large intestine. And so we have a protocol that she's helped to develop with us. And also I'm developing a specific product for her. It's taking me some time because she's very particular, and I don't mind because that's what we need, a particular design of the product. We also have protocols for anything from reseeding the gut. For, let's say you come in and you have severe diarrhea. I always tell people we need, for severe diarrhea, and a lot of young people unfortunately have that, we start them with the Trenev Trio, which is the oil matrix and the most powerful product we have. That's what's needed for that. When they have constipation, We have different powdered formulas that we give to the constipation because we don't want anybody becoming dependent on it. And we give you the bacteria in the product called Bulgaricum or Superdophilus that helps with the peristalsis and move the digested matter out within a 24-hour period. The shorter the time, the better is the host, because you need to be absorbing the nutrients and eliminating the waste in a timely fashion. We have protocols for skin. We have clinical trials that we did for skin that shows, the skin is a mirror of what your inside looks like, your intestinal tract, your skin. We have people for Crohn's, we have protocols for Crohn's disease, inflammatory bowel disease, any type of allergic reaction to food sensitivity. We can give you customized protocols to deal with your patients. And we know we've seen results for the last 40 years when anybody's followed our protocol. And the beauty is that our bacteria are not harmful at any level. This is very important. They can take the whole bottle. It will never harm the host because they're intrinsically part of us. They're not something that we've added. And I'll give you an example. There's a popularity now, because I'm going to come to the reason I'm going to talk about this, the gut-brain connection. I was actually the first one that talked about it and was ridiculed and minimized for that. And the reason being that they always want to find a way to treat the symptoms. So there's a bacteria that's called Lactobacillus plantarum. And the reason it's called plantarum, it's a very effective silage organism, and it's very good in combating overgrowth of yeast. The problem with that is that it also inhibits bifidobacteria. We've tested it in our lab, and it will, inhibit 4 species of bifidobacteria. And that's one of the reasons we say that you should never take these bacteria to treat symptoms, because you have no idea what they might be doing further down in the digestive tract. And that's why a little knowledge is a dangerous thing here. So we have that gut-brain connection. And why is our products effective? Because our Lactobacillus acidophilus will produce hydrogen peroxide in microns to directly compete with the yeast. It will produce antimicrobial substances when it's necessary to compete and make sure that it's protecting the integrity of the lining of the GI tract. Excuse me, let me take some water.
Yeah, get a drink there. We need you to keep talking.
That's my water. So that's why you cannot just take a bacterium to say, okay, I'm going to treat depression, anxiety, mood swings. And great, you're going to get results because it's a very tough competitor. But the problem is, if it starts inhibiting the bifidobacteria in a large intestine, you've helped one area, and now the other area is in big trouble. Make sense?
Yes.
And so when we talk about the gut-brain connection, I've talked about this. And what I want everybody to take away, one thing from this meeting, is that the properties of probiotics, or what I call precision probiotics, is to give the body the tools to heal itself. They are never meant to treat symptoms or to do something that's out of order in the unity of what's important in that GI tract. That's one thing I want people, the whole point of probiotics is it's there to give your body the tools it needs to heal itself, not to treat symptoms or to tell you this product is for the elderly, this product is for women, this product is for men. That's not true. Our products will handle the gut-brain relation, the skin, the GI issues, the cognitive problems that you may have, and female problems. We know that fertility has become a big issue in this country. And I'm fortunate to say that about 30 years ago, I worked with the head of OBGYN at Cedars-Sinai Hospital here in Los Angeles, and we've developed a protocol, which I'm reintroducing, where we take our Superdophilus and make a paste and insert it digitally into our vagina to help with the vaginal issues and urinary tract infections. We take it both orally and we use it vaginally. And the reason this is important is because I don't know what's going on, but we have young women who can't get pregnant, who can't conceive, and we're losing our population. We're not creating healthy children. So that's very important and something that will be available to everybody. So whether you have a vaginal issue, whether you have a urinary tract issue, whether you have a gut-brain issue, whether you have a skin issue, whether you have an autoimmune disease, whether you have anything that's upset on your intestinal wall, the first and primary function is to develop a specific program to create that unity that we need on that intestinal wall that interacts with your immune cells, that interacts with your cellular structure without damaging anything. Because remember, every hour you're losing 10 million cells. So every year your 50 trillion cells are replaced. So when people tell you you have a chronic disease, I said nonsense. The body was built to heal itself. We just have to give it the right tools and not try to treat symptoms, because we're mimicking what's happening in the pharma industry and we're bringing it to our holistic care. And that has not been working for us, because I've told people 50 or more years of alternative medicine, and we still have 80% of people in our so-called healthcare system that have chronic disease. How did that happen?
Yep, preach. Because there's no money in healthy people. That's how that happened.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that you could go on for hours, I'm sure. So I just want to lay out a little bit of what's coming next. Natasha and I did talk about a course, and hopefully we can get that outlined and ready to go. And it will be for anybody that wants to learn, practitioner focused, but anyone's welcome to learn how to take care of themselves. Number two, I put the practitioner wholesale sign up. That is for people that are practitioners that want to get a wholesale account with ProTren, which is the company that she's talking about, that she's had, and her products. If you are a layperson here and you're listening and you think there's some things that you'd like to try, I put a link to my store. I do carry her products on the store. And if you're a practitioner that has a Get Healthy store, these are available in your catalog. So I just want to cover all those bases. So you can reach out directly to ProTren if you are a practitioner. You can order products if you need them or you want to try something. I think probably the trio is probably what you're saying is the general good for everybody, the Trenev trio.
Yeah, and it's, even though I say 30 billion, it's probably much more powerful than anything on the market, because those 30 billion actually survive.
Okay, so if somebody's going to use that for a child, what's your recommendation there?
The only recommendation is because of the size of the pill. I don't recommend children that are younger than 8, but it's not that it's not safe for them. It's just that I'm worried about choking. But our products actually are safe and actually our products are used across the spectrum. Infants, children, teenagers, mothers, fathers, elderly. You don't have to buy a separate product. All you have to understand is that we make 4 bacteria, 3 come in an oil matrix for very super action, and all 4 of them come in growth mediums specifically designed for them to treat the rest of the body. So you can go on something we call a healthy start system, where you use the 3 bacteria for the children, for the teenagers, for the elderly. And as I said, any of our products are good for any member of the family. There's no such designation as this is only good for women, this is only good for men. These are all marketing positions. The only one that's hard and fast is that the Bifidobacteria infantis in the LifeStart product is for newborn infants, pregnant women, nursing mothers, and as I said, sensitive people of all ages. That's the only one that's separate from the rest. But any of the other ones can be used by any family member at any amount without any fear of any bad repercussions.
Okay, and so could you break open a capsule for a child if you needed?
Yes,
Okay. And what was the one for the baby you said?
it's called Life Start.
Okay, got
And
it.
we have also, I had to go through a lot of problems. I had to make it in an organic rice medium because, again, the problem with people not, and that one also comes in a goat milk formula, which I'm very proud of because goat milk is most similar to human milk. And one interesting aspect I wanted to share with your group that, the human milk oligosaccharide was specifically designed to stimulate the growth of this bifidobacteria infantis. And I said, how cool is that? That the mother's milk was designed to specifically encourage the growth of this bacterium because it does so many wonderful things for the newborn.
Wow. Amazing. All right, let's take some questions.
Sure.
Are you familiar with EOE and what product would you recommend?
What's EOE?
Exactly. What's EOE? Peggy, speak up. Where are you, Peggy?
Eosinophilic esophagitis.
Thank you.
Uh, it's a precancerous condition of the esophagus.
Correct.
Yeah. I would recommend the Superdophilus and Bulgaricus powder, either the dairy-free or the dairy, specifically a teaspoon in unchilled filtered water into 4, 6 ounces, 8 ounces before every meal or as many times a day that you feel a discomfort. And then I would take one Trenev Trio either in the morning or at night, whichever suits the patient better. And then I would say to everybody who has an esophageal problem to stop eating all raw foods. They need to either steam their vegetables and use extra virgin olive oil, or they need to saute the vegetables, but you've got to stop eating all raw foods. And of course, you got to stop with the simple carbohydrates because that's encouraging the cancer to grow.
What testing do you use to discern which is needed? Do you test or do you rely on practitioners coming to you to tell you what they think is wrong?
Well, I don't test, and simply because there's not many tests that are accurate, and please forgive me, but I'm going to tell you that these fecal testing stuff is just not accurate.
Thank
Uh,
you. I agree with you.
I have a whole position paper, which I'll happily share with everybody. I've taken a lot of grief for it, but I said, look, just basically without getting too technical, what comes out of your large intestine is not representative of what's in your ileum or any part of your small intestine or even part of your colon, because there's further fermentation that takes place in the large intestine before it's expelled as feces. And 40% of your dry weight fecal matter is bacteria. So you have to have a very, very expensive test to even begin to understand what composition of bacteria you have in that fecal sample. We're not there. I know that Dr. Hassan charges like $1,500 for her stool sample, and she's probably the only one that can understand how to read it and interpret it right now. So it's not a test. I would recommend that you what is this? Something, this meeting has been recorded?
Yeah,
Say,
it is recorded. It's okay.
it just says it's Arabic and it says it sounds like you might have switched to a different language.
I have no idea if someone switched it to Arabic, which would be interesting.
Yeah, well,
Uh, so
anyway, that's what I would say, for that answer. And I'm hoping that answers their question. But
okay.
we do have, look, we have recommendations of protocols. And I tell people, before you spend a lot of money testing your patients, would you please just trust my 50 years of knowledge in this industry and start them on a protocol to fix their GI tract? And then you can, if you're allowed to draw blood, fine, take blood tests, do muscle testing. I think muscle testing is okay. But the most important thing is, and this is not a sales pitch, is to get that GI tract somehow functional, because it seems to me that we have a huge dysfunction of the GI tract, especially in North America, not just America, Canadians actually have the highest incidence of irritable bowel syndrome, which is just unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, and I agree with you with the GI testing, and it's not a criticism against anyone that uses it. I've found it to be inaccurate a lot with people, and they've spent a lot of money on it. Went to practitioners, had protocols put in based on it. Number one, it didn't tell everything that came out because there was stuff left behind that I could see in the blood work that wasn't noticeable in this GI map. And then, like you said, there is, why is this? No, I don't want to confirm my speaking language as Arabic. All right, whoever's doing the Arabic thing, I'm going to take you off of this meeting. I just want to make sure that if you are using GI maps, make sure you have another, form that you can look at. But as Natasha said, and what I always say, it's not necessary to test everyone to death. I mean, if someone's coming in with GI issues, obviously they have a disruption in their probiotic flora. Because that's part of the digestive tract and it's part of our immune system and part of our communication. So I think that's what I'm hearing is it's a safe bet just to put them on the Trenev trio. It's a safe bet just to start putting in some good gut flora for them so that they can repopulate.
Right. I've saw 2 questions here. Yes, IBS, you can start with the Life Start, but you can use our other 3 powdered products. And we have 2 wonderful people, Mark and David, who I've trained personally. And that's one of my things I'm very proud of. They will spend time. They will give you the protocol. They will hold your hand. They all love hearing good feedback, so they will help you. We're not going to leave you to yourself. We want you to be successful, and we want to get your patients better. I promise. And then I saw another question about constipation. The best product we have for constipation is called Bulgaricum. That has the Bulgarican yogurt organism in it. And it's a phenomenal organism because it pre-digests the food for you. And it also has an incredible effect on the peristalsis. In other words, it's not going to make your muscles lazy. It works with your body to help move the feces out. So the whole point of, in the old days, we used to call it transit time. I don't know if people still use that term, but transit time is the amount of time from when you ingest your food to the time it exits the other end. And the perfect transit time that was in the 1980s was when they studied the Maasai warriors, and their transit time was 8 hours. And the transit time for elderly Britons was 2 weeks. So, if we have it once in 24 hours, I think for our society, that's more than adequate. If you do it more than that, that's even better.
Awesome. All right, so a few more questions. What are there directions for how to make the paste you referred to insert vaginally?
Yes, we have a sheet that I've just approved that Mark is using. It's very explanatory. And I'll tell you right now, you take a teaspoon of the Superdophilus dairy or dairy-free, or you can open up one of those powdered probiotic capsules. You mix it with a little bit of filtered water, and make sure that all of the environment is clean, sanitized. Use a clean, dry spoon. Don't contaminate the powder. And then you can use a finger cot or a plastic glove to take that teaspoon and insert it vaginally. And you do it 7 to 14 days, depending on your need. And you take the product also orally to make sure that we now reconnect that flora to a healthy status.
Awesome. And, some of the things that you said to me, like with the Life Start, when you look at that Life Start, it's a pack of 3 bottles, and you were saying like that's okay, like you need to be giving this all the time. So can you explain how much, how long?
Okay, so the package is you have Life Start and you in 3 different growth mediums, and I did that because as I said, goat's milk is probably their favorite food, so I put it in goat's milk. We have it in the regular dairy, cow dairy product, and we have now a new organic rice formula. So that's the Life Start. The 3 other products that I have that's part of the Trenev trio, but these are the powdered products with their growth medium intact, is Superdophilus, Bifidonate, and Bulgaricum. And you don't have to remember those three. We'll help you with that. And what you do is you can take, we don't mix the powders in the bottles because you would have an uneven product in competition. What we do is we tell people you get the 3 bottles, you take a half a teaspoon to a teaspoon of each product, you put it in a clean glass with filtered water, 4 to 8 ounces, and you drink it before meals, before bed, or first thing when you get up in the morning. It's a good time to take it. And this comes with the bacteria and their own food, and they've produced these peptides and amino acid that are building blocks for our body and can help the bacteria to attach itself to your intestinal wall in specific areas where the most need is.
Okay. So let's see, suggestion for chronic fatigue syndrome, how long and long COVID gut brain symptoms.
Wow. Yeah, and those are heavy duty. So for chronic fatigue, I would say you would take probably one of the Trenev trios 3 times a day, and you would take a half a teaspoon to a teaspoon of each of the powders mixed in the filtered unchilled water before each meal, and take it in between. Whenever you feel terrible, I always tell people, take another dose of that powdered probiotic. It really helps you to deal with whatever, is making you so tired and foggy brained.
Awesome. Could you suspend in coconut butter to make the suppository to insert, or would that interfere with absorption?
Well, I wouldn't use coconut butter because, coconut is antimicrobial and antifungal.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd have to use something else. You could maybe mix it with a teaspoon of plain yogurt and insert it. But I would not put, fat compounds in the vaginal tract unless I know they were compatible.
Question, what should you take for eczema?
Oh, yeah. Eczema is you take one of the Trenev trio 3 times a day.
Simple, huh?
Mhm.
That was an easy one.
Yeah. That's also for acne. I've had people with rosacea. I had one woman that I met in a park. I mean, happens to be all the time. Somehow people just wander over to me, introduce themselves, and I end up talking to them. Don't ask me how it happens. But this poor woman spent over $4,000 with a dermatologist in Beverly Hills, and she said she couldn't go out in the sun. Beautiful young woman with a beautiful 3-year-old child, and couldn't get rid of her rosacea for over 18 months. And just gave her that. I gave her the Trenev trio 3 times a day, and within 3 weeks she was completely back, and now she's telling all her friends about it. I'm not paying her to do that, and she gave me a really nice testimonial. And we know it works very well with skin problems.
Yes. So any thoughts on the long COVID question with COVID brain, gut brain connection?
Yeah, well, the long haul COVID, we have a protocol from Dr. Hassan. She recommends the Trenev trio, 2 or 3 capsules, 2 to 3 times a day, and she recommends a lot of the goat milk Life Start, 3 capsules first thing in the morning. But we have the protocols that she has recommended if you call Mark or David in the office.
So we'll try to get some protocols to send out to everybody at registered on this email. Would that be fair, Natasha? Just some basic
Absolutely.
plans?
Yeah.
I've also given the connection for wholesale accounts for practitioners. And then if you're not a practitioner, you can't get a wholesale, I am putting the links to the products she's talking about in the chat, so you can look at that.
I saw a question somebody asking about the Lactobacillus reuteri. It's the same problem. It's a good organism, but it inhibits bifidobacteria. We just can't do things like that.
Yeah. All right. What can you take for flatulence?
A flatulence, either the superdophilus or the bulgaricum. Remember, we all pass gas every day. It's normal. Okay. But if
Listen,
you're,
I don't want you saying that in my house. I'm full of a house of boys. Okay. No.
well, and, listen, it was years ago, that I bought this book at a PBS store. When PBS used to have their own stores, and it talks about passing wind. And it's really a funny book. I should, share it with you. But it talks about, that gas is normal. We just don't hear it. It's when it gets trapped because there's improper digestion is when it becomes normal. And when it's smelly, it's because it's exposed to sulfur compounds. And I said, we make jokes about it, but it's not a joke because you wouldn't be laughing if your car was given the wrong gasoline and it had, sputtering problems and it stopped in the middle of the road. But fortunately, our body is strong enough that it can take this. So if you're passing excessive flatulence, especially loud, it means that the bacteria in your gut are digesting this food and causing more gas than normal.
Okay. So a couple more questions and then guys, we're going to end it. We'll get the protocols passed out. So, any suggestions for a young woman with hormonal imbalances characterized by weight gain, hips and thighs?
Yeah, the superdophilus, that's the, acidophilus. And one of the wonderful things early in the 1980s, there was paper published that this special small intestinal population is critical to helping reabsorb hormones because we not only stop producing hormones, we expel them through the feces.
Okay. Awesome. And I'm assuming there's a question. I have a year-old that has a dairy sensitivity. Is the Life Start safe for him? I thought I heard you say it has goat milk.
No, it comes in goat milk and it comes in an organic rice formula. So you have 3 formulations for the Life Start, so you can choose.
Right.
And I made the organic rice, and that's something we should talk about. I've studied healthy cultures for centuries, and milk is the only food that's really a food if you think about it. And the thing is that in the healthy cultures, that milk is fermented, so that means it's broken down, and the bacteria love it, and the human host benefits from it. We have to figure out what happened to our culture that everybody's allergic to milk.
Well, no, I'm just kidding. So I think, processing the way we feed our animals, corn-fed, not grass-fed. I mean, just it starts at the source. And by the time it gets to us, and we can even take a step back with, chemical farming and chemical fertilizers and, the GMO of our crops and our animals eat those crops and it goes around and around and around.
Yeah.
I really think at this point, our only defense is to understand a good offense like this. It doesn't mean that we can't grow our own food and try to take that back a little bit.
Right.
And that's what we have to do. It starts with
what I want to tell you now is that we have over a dozen microbes in our communities that are resistant to every known antibiotic. That's not good.
That's not good.
And they're so powerful now that they can shut down your kidney. They can cause tremendous harm. In fact, I'm now digging into some research that even identified an organism that could be the possible cause of multiple sclerosis.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome. And I think, having a good microbiota is important, is probably the most important thing that we can do right now. And probiotics were big and bad and sexy a couple years ago, and then they kind of lost their magnitude because I think the market got saturated with them and digestive issues weren't getting any better. And I mean, I know that in my practice, I see tons of people with digestive issues. There's always a digestive issue, always, even if it's expressive or not. There's leaky gut, there's parasites, there's overgrowth candida, there's SIBO. I mean, it goes on people with eczema, psoriasis. So it's at the core, and you can't balance anything else. Any
it's not
without balancing the gut.
right. And look, just some data that I have. recently there was data about 80% of the urine samples in the United States contained glyphosate.
Oh, yeah,
80%.
I did a whole class on glyphosate. It was just ridiculous how it breaks down the amino acid communication. It spills calcium out of the cells. It breaks down the digestive tract, the genetic modification of the plants and our DNA. And it's not even that. It's coupled with, mechanical farming, coupled with not only the glyphosate, but the pesticides that are considered an excipient within formulation, so they don't have to be tested, that were actually the actual cause of cancers, not the glyphosate itself, but the facilitation of those two together. So it's just like you're saying with bacteria, right? You put two bad things in one capsule, you're going to get some bad things. So it's exactly what you're saying. So last question, my 11th-month-old doesn't really have bowel movements regularly. What would be recommended for that?
Oh, I would take the Life Start and the Superdophilus, about a half a teaspoon 2 or 3 times a day. You can increase the amount and just monitor whatever the infant is fed. Maybe the infant could be allergic to something, even if it's good. Find out, maybe by restricting the food and taking it out of the diet for a couple of days and then reintroducing it and start playing detective.
Okay. All right, guys. Well, this has been amazing, as I thought it would be. And I appreciate your time, Natasha, coming on and making it at a level where everybody can appreciate and understand it. So we'll get an email sent out. I'm going to render the recording as promised. I'm going to send it back out to everybody. I'll contact Mark. I'll get some protocols. And we'll send those out in the email for everybody. Practitioners, go get your wholesale account. You're going to want it for your practice. If you have the Get Healthy store, add these products on. If you're a lay person, again, I've put several links in the chat that will be available in the recording as well. And we're going to do more with Natasha. This is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much underneath the surface, and a course, I think, and protocols in those courses and understanding, and everyone's invited. And she's going to teach at a certain level, but everyone can come and try to learn. Honestly,
the good news is that, look, this can never harm you. That's the most important thing we have to learn in our industry. No matter if you took a bottle, it will never harm you, ever, under any conditions. For 40 years, I have no complaints that it's ever harmed anybody. I don't even have complaints with the Better Business Bureau. That's what's important, that we in our alternative healthcare industry make sure we never give any compounds that can harm people at any level. And we have to brace ourselves, guys, because it's not my data, but several prominent physicians have said that from these vaccine injured cases, we may have in the next 10 years, 50 million deaths. That's a lot. And we need to take proactive measures, and we need to get people healthy again, because we can't function as a country if we don't have healthy children and we don't have healthy citizens.
Yeah, we got to help the kids. Like, they are the next generation coming up. So Natasha is on Instagram. She does a podcast. And so you can find out great information there. She's also on several other podcasts. And I think I'm on your show this week, right? Thursday?
Right. Tomorrow we're doing one together.
Tomorrow.
And that one streams through something called StreamYard. It's on X, it's on LinkedIn, it's on Instagram and Facebook.
Awesome. All right. Well, you heard it there. Go follow Natasha on Instagram, X, Facebook, everywhere. And make sure you tune in, because I've been watching some of your shows. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. And just know I do this with a great deal of love and my complete desire to really help.
Absolutely. Well, your passion shines through for sure. And guys, thanks for being here tonight. I know this was time out of your schedule. God bless each one of you. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out, and we'll get the email sent out with the recording and protocols as soon as I get all that stuff. Okay?
Thank you, everyone.
God bless. Thank you.